This episode of the Run From the Norm podcast is brought to you by Run From the Norm. That's right, we're doing something a little bit different, and we're sponsoring this episode ourselves. In honor of our guest, the one and only Renaissance man, Frank McKinney, we wanted to do something special. So there's a couple parts to this. From now until the end of the month, the end of May, head to runfromthenorm.com, hit the store, and use code FRANK, F-R-A-N-K, at checkout, and you're going to get free shipping anywhere in the U.S., which is, depending on where your trail leads, it's going to save you $10, $15 at least. So as an added bonus to this, we're also going to donate 10% of all of the sales through the end of the month to the Caring House Project, which is Frank's nonprofit that's building homes for families in need. You can learn more at frank-mckinney.com. So support a great cause, support Frank as he gears up for his 8th Badwater finish, and rock the gear that reminds you to go full send and never let go of that inner playground punk. Because, my friends, it is always a good time for recess. How do you do, my friends? Welcome back to another action-packed, adventure-filled episode of the Run From the Norm podcast, and boy, do we have a doozy for you. Meet Frank McKinney, the real estate rock czar, and someone who, for me, qualifies as one of the most interesting people I have ever been fortunate enough to meet. He's built $50 million oceanfront mansions without buyers lined up because, why the hell not? He's run Badwater 12 times, finished 7, and is heading back for number 8 this year after a 6-year break that you're going to hear more about in our discussion. He's written 9 books in 8 different genres because, as Frank likes to put it, limits are just a construct of the mind. And he's even built 32 self-sustaining villages in Haiti for families who literally survive on dirt cakes flavored with bouillon cubes. It's absolutely nuts. He calls himself a real estate artist. I call him a full-send, zero apologies, purpose-fueled force of nature. In our chat, we talk about what it means to reinvent yourself, how to chase impact instead of ego, and why dragging flaming tires through Florida humidity might actually be a form of spiritual growth because, #reasons. This conversation's so good you just might need a post-run recovery shake for your brain. Either way, I think you know what time it is. It's time to run from the norm. Frank.
I thought I was punctual.
Yeah, I was looking at the clock. I was like, well, do I wait till right at top of the hour or give you a call right now? So
no, that's perfect. I mean, you left a message at 4 and it's 4:01. So here we are.
Yeah. How you doing?
Good. Getting ready for a long... Saturdays are my long days. So, at my age, I do kind of one real long one a week. So tomorrow I am going to be dragging a tire to simulate the climb from mile 42 to mile 59. That goes from below sea level to a mile above sea level. And so in Florida, since I don't have any hills, I'm going to be dragging a tire for those 17 miles.
Oh, my God. Well, I will tell you, I did already hit record here, so we are recording our chat.
Okay.
And I just want to give some context. You're talking about Badwater, which we're going to get into, and I'm sure that's going to be a good bulk of our conversation. But as I went through the information that your publicist sent over and that's on your website, your life kind of reads like 5 lives packed into one. You're a real estate artist, which I'd love to get into. You're an author, written 9 books in 8 different genres, philanthropist with the Caring House Project. You're obviously an ultramarathoner, and I feel like we're barely scratching the surface with you. So when somebody asks you what you do, where do you even begin? And with all the roles that you've taken on, which one do you feel tells the truest story of who you are truly at your core and why?
It's a lost combination of 2 words. It might sound egotistical, of which I hope by the end of the podcast you'll find out that I'm anything but. Renaissance man.
Totally.
It was a moniker that was actually given to me about 25 years ago by Barron's Magazine, which I don't even know is still around. Many of the things that you'll find on my website, the Real Estate Rock Czar was the Wall Street Journal, Daredevil Developer was USA Today. And then this Renaissance Man thing, after my first book came out, it was some title about the new age of Renaissance Man or something like that. So either that or I'm one of the few functioning multiple personality disorder individuals.
Highly functioning, if that's the case.
Highly functioning, yeah. So, it's really hard to answer that when I'm asked now, what do you do? And now just to save time, I say I'm an author.
And why is that?
Because if I've got 2 hours and you're sitting next to me on a plane, I might be able to get into the other things. But, I might be at Whole Foods checking out with my favorite TTLA sandwich, which is a vegan sandwich that I love that Whole Foods makes. No plug there. Well, maybe they'll give you a royalty or something. But are you in a band? I get that all the time. Are you a musician? And I say, no, I don't sing my words. You wouldn't like to hear me sing them, but I do write them. And I've written 9 books in 8 different genres. So it just seems to be an easier path. If I try to explain what a real estate artist is, I don't like the moniker developer. I really can't stand the kind of the prejudice that goes along with the use of the word developer, kind of a gentrification person that comes in and slashes and burns and redevelops an area that people don't want to have redeveloped.
You seem to be more of a visionary in that regard.
Well, yeah, I mean, a developer, somebody who comes in and clears a big swath of land and builds a bunch of tract homes. That's not me. In my whole career as a real estate artist, again, I forget the publication that gave me that name, but I've built 44 direct oceanfront homes on speculation, meaning I build them without a buyer, in 30 years. So 44 houses sounds like a lot, but you span that over 30 years, that's a house and a half a year.
But also about $14 million average price.
Well, yes, and don't let that mislead you. It's just, I started with a $50,000 fixer-upper, a crack house. We were flipping houses before the word flip was not used outside of the sport of gymnastics.
What got you into it in the first place?
Flipping houses or buying, real estate?
Real estate in general, yeah.
So I was a tennis pro. I was, let's give a little bit of the, maybe the backstory so your listeners can understand. I'm a corn-fed country boy from Indiana. I was born and raised on a farm, oldest of 6. Father worked at a bank. Mother was a school teacher. I went to 4 high schools in 4 years. I was asked to leave one after the next. Matter of fact, I went to a school that was run by Benedictine monks, a reform school, because I was a real troubled child, a real troubled teen. I was in juvenile detention 7 times before 18. So my mother and father did the right thing when I had just turned 18 and says, you've got to leave. You've got 5 younger brothers and sisters. You're ruining the family. You pick where you want to go. We'll buy the plane ticket. You put your stuff in a backpack and we'll give you a $50 bill. And so I picked Florida. And because it was better than being in Indiana in January, which is when I got on that plane. And I was a maintenance worker on a golf course that led me to I was a really good tennis player as a young boy, like ranked in the top 5 in the Midwest.
Holy moly.
I gave that all up for the life of, juvenile delinquency. And I wouldn't say crime because I was too young to do that. Or at least I was too young to be caught for crimes. I was a juvenile delinquent, convicted of a crime. So after being on the golf course as a maintenance worker, I was around affluence. Jake, you got to understand, coming from Indiana and landing in Palm Beach was culture shock.
Oh, I bet.
And working on a golf course around people who played golf all day. Like they never seemed to go to work. Turn the clock back, you listeners, to when you're 18. You're young, you're impressionable, you're materialistic, you're consumeristic. And I couldn't believe the lifestyle I saw unfolding before my eyes as an 18-year-old. Now, you're too young to remember, but there was a show on TV called Lifestyles of Rich and Famous.
Oh, yeah, I remember.
For you younger people, think MTV Cribs. MTV Cribs is very similar to Lifestyles of Rich and Famous. And here I saw people live in it. And I wanted a piece of it, Jake. But, with no education, no hope of pursuing a formal education, I couldn't even get into a community college with a 1.8 GPA. I went from the golf course as a maintenance worker around rich people who played golf all day, and I became a certified tennis professional, teaching professional. I didn't tour, I taught.
Let me ask you real quick. So you said you were a corn-fed country boy, but for those that haven't seen pictures of you, you look like you were in a rock band. I mean, when you went from Indiana to Florida and you show up on this golf course, did you already embody that, or is this something that developed over time?
No, I have to say, in one of my books, there's a chapter titled, Don't Compromise Yourself for Anyone, Anything, Any Job, Anytime. So if you knew me in high school, I was a kid in the back of the class that was always cutting up, but I wore white leather pants and I had really big hair, So I chose just to kind of be true to myself. I've kept my hair long my entire life. And yes, on the golf course as a maintenance worker, they didn't care. I'm making $4.25 an hour. They didn't care. Matter of fact, I earned the nickname the White Haitian. Which is my connection to Haiti, which we'll get into later.
That's the connection.
White Haitian was a nickname I wore with a badge of honor because the Haitians have a very, very strong work ethic. 2 and 3 jobs to make money to send home to their family. I busted my ass on that golf course. Who at 18 years old gets up at 4 a.m, because you got to work on the golf course before the golfers get there, to put food on their table? Like, I needed to eat. So there was a limit to how much my life was going to grow at $4.25 an hour. I then moved to being a tennis pro.
Is it safe to say you kind of had a chip on your shoulder? If you were asked to leave your house and you have to completely relocate to a whole nother state, did you feel that you had to succeed to prove people wrong?
I'm going to answer that yes to both ways you phrased that question.
Okay.
So I was comfortable with who I was. If we had the time and you were a therapist and you had a couch laid out in front of you, I would say that my father was an overachiever. My father, he was Olympic medalist, gold, silver, and bronze medalist in swimming.
Oh, wow.
He was the youngest bank president. And he was a great dad, but he was kind of a workaholic. And I acted up when I was younger to get his attention. I'm pretty sure that's why I was acting out, because I wanted my father's attention. So coming to Florida and, breaking the ties from my family in Indiana, I wanted to make a name for myself. But Jake, my name is Frank Edward McKinney III, Francis Edward McKinney III. There was a Frank Sr. who was very successful as a junior. There's very successful in banking. You see my picture. The listeners can. If you Google me, you'll see I do not look like a banker. There is no way I'm ever going to be working at a bank. So I wanted to make a name for myself. But the first way you phrased the first part of that question, I was very comfortable making that name in the skin that I was in. I didn't want to compromise who I was for a job. Matter of fact, I did it one time and I felt terrible about it.
It almost sounds like, you're following pedigree, but you really want to forge your own path. You want to write your own story, so to speak.
Any child that went through some kind of trauma, and again, my trauma wasn't anything compared to others. My family was fine. It's not like I was left out in the streets. But, I wanted my father's attention, and it was very gratifying maybe a decade or two later in Florida, where I was known as Frank McKinney, the tennis pro, Frank McKinney, the real estate artist, Frank McKinney, the author. It wasn't Frank McKinney, a banker in Indiana. Nobody knew who that was. I guess subconsciously that was pretty important to me. There's a method to the madness. So part of the appearance, part of the way we market our books, or especially the multi-million-dollar houses, there's 8 billion people on this planet. Only about 50,000 can afford what I did for a living, because I don't really build the big ones on the ocean anymore. I'm now in North Carolina, kind of semi-retired there. So our grand unveilings were extremely theatrical. A ton of flash, a ton of sizzle. And a lot of people, a lot of haters, even to this day, will say, oh, he's all flash, he's all sizzle. I will say this. There's no way I'm all flash and all sizzle if I've been around for 3.5 decades. There's plenty of substance to back up the flash. I'm the opening act for what gets you in the front door of a $15 million house. I don't come with the house. You can hate the way I dress. You can hate the way I wear my hair. But oh my God, are you going to love that house when you walk in the front door? I step aside, like the whole act steps aside. And I'm in the business of selling high-end homes because I'm building them on speculation, Jake. I do not have a buyer in mind when I design and build these houses.
You're really putting it all on the line because you kind of have to productize yourself.
Well, I mean, my mother always would say, why can't you just put an open house sign out in front of the house and just have a typical open house? Why do you have to jump a motorcycle over a replica of the first house you ever built, which I did to unveil one of our houses.
I love that.
Multiple things we've done at our grand unveilings. I played a pirate in a kind of an unveiling scene where I zip lined from the roof of one house to the roof of a guest house while I was battling Blackbeard, all in front of hundreds of people that were there to see the show, on the opening act. But then when that little kind of silliness was over, it belongs on the back lot in Vegas or somewhere way back on Broadway. The true show starts when you open the front door of one of those houses, So that was
there's a method to the madness.
Yes, there was always a method to the madness. And listen, you're Jake. I'm Frank. I am not Apple. I'm not Coke. I'm not Pepsi. I'm not NVIDIA, where a brand can speak for itself. I have to be, we have to be, you have to be, listener, your own ringmaster, your own Carnival Barker, your own P.T. Barnum, to bring attention to whatever it is that you're doing for a living. Because personal branding is the art of your customer, either current or future, becoming subliminally intoxicated with you first, Jake, then your product or service.
Yeah.
It's so critical. And then what eventually happened was, if Frank McKinney was doing a house on the ocean, like Van Gogh, Renoir, Monet was painting a painting, they would wait in line to see what that three-dimensional painting looked like.
Yeah.
That's what personal branding did over multiple decades.
You're basically building the demand, but then you have everything behind it to support what comes next when the door opens and the next real chapter of it starts.
Well, that's why I go with real estate artist, not developer. Who's going to go buy a house from a developer? I want to see what a real estate artist creates. And mind you, I might look like I can sing or play an instrument. I would love to be able to paint or sculpt. My artistry is three-dimensional in nature that you can live in. So yes, I'm an artist, but my calling was to build these beautiful oceanfront homes that you will see no finer anywhere else in the world, that people will walk in the door to see for the first time on a Tuesday. And Jake, they'll be sleeping there as owners on a Friday.
That's crazy. That's so interesting. So did you draw or anything like that? Or you have these visions in your head and this is how you bring them to life?
No, I think so. 1.8 GPA out of high school. There were two classes that I got, actually three. One was an elective that I got really good grades in. One was jewelry. Like I love to make jewelry. So maybe that's the artist side.
Interesting.
The second was creative writing. I was always a great writer. And the third I chose to apply myself to was math, because I knew someday I'd have a lot of money and I needed to learn how to count it.
Interesting.
Yeah, I was really good at those three things. And the others, maybe they bored me. You know, it's not like my IQ was super low. I have an emotional quotient that's maybe above average, but my attention span, my attention deficit disorder when it comes to sitting at a desk listening to a teacher just was on full display as a youth.
Well, and it's interesting too, because as you explain, those three different things is what makes your unique vision.
Yeah, and I also think it's sometimes a lonely existence to be Frank McKinney. You know, there's a fine line between an eccentric and a lunatic.
Do you feel that you have to explain yourself to people?
I don't anymore. I mean, how would I have the time to do that?
Yeah.
I don't.
Good point.
There's one place I never have to explain myself. One place. And I bet you can guess where it is.
Absolutely. Badwater. You know, I do want to ask a couple other questions. One of them is, how do you find the balance for all of this? And as you bring family into the picture, how do you keep a balance between them all?
Therein lies the misnomer, the word balance. I would be a multi-billionaire if I had $1 for every time somebody asked me, how do you keep it in balance? We're not meant to stay in balance, Jake. Homeostasis for human beings would drive us mad. Think of balance as a grandfather clock in motion, tick, tock, tick, back and forth. And when it stops moving, it's in balance, it's in center, it's not ticking anymore, it's right in the dead center, it's not functioning properly. So our whole lives really are meant to be out of balance. Now, a good, like, simplistic example is a woman who's pregnant. Think about how her life, be it a professional woman, a stay-at-home mom, and for you women who are listening, how out of balance your life was for those 9 months. But wasn't it worth it? How out of balance my life will be for the next 3 months training for Badwater. But it's got to be that way. You know, I've never been comfortable. Matter of fact, I go a little mad if my life seems to be, I don't want it to be in balance. It's very unnatural for life to be in balance. So I guarantee you, if I had a therapist back when I was 17, I had ADHD, ADD, OCD, ODD, you name it. I had it. I put it into my blender every morning and drank that shake. But I will tell you that desire to live a balanced life, I guess, is a maddening, circuitous chase that we should kind of cease.
That's a very, very interesting point. But as you're saying, for 3 months, you're solely focused, well, not solely, but primarily focused on training for what's next on your list, Badwater, or you're focused on building the house at this point. You're kind of rolling through these different interests at different points in time to where you gradually build this beautiful body of work.
But you're almost talking linearly, almost sequentially. It doesn't have to be sequentially. It can be synonymously. Actually, it has to be. So let's say I'm building a typical oceanfront house, a $15 million front house. From the time I put a pencil to the design paper to the time I cut the ribbon and jump over the house like the grand unveiling, that's usually a 3-year time span.
Oh, okay.
So, you know, every day I'm like Gutzen Borglum. Gutzen Borglum was the sculptor of Mount Rushmore. And it took him 16 years. As a matter of fact, he died before Mount Rushmore. His son ended up finishing in Mount Rushmore. But do you imagine that after like the first 2 weeks that he even saw the nose hair on George Washington? Like, no, you don't see progress. So even though I have a pretty short attention span, I have no problem packing up my lunch pail, i.e. Gutzen Borglum, like he packed up his tool bag. And with hammer and chisel, get that house done day in and day out for 3 years. I know I got to show up. One thing without an education, one thing without the benefit of falling back on a degree was I had to be unafraid of hard work. I'd be unafraid of packing my lunch pail like the guys on the job site do, showing up day in and day out. That's the way I approach anything in life. Badwater took a long time just to get qualified for, let alone train for, get in for. It's like I love my long hair. But if I shaved my head bald, I'd wait 2 or 3 years and it'd be back, eventually, if you're patient. So most of the endeavors that you've referenced are happening simultaneously. It's just there are some times when that swing of the grandfather clock pendulum goes kind of far out of balance, a little too far, but that's life. I can't let that bother me.
So what would your response be to the people that say, if you want to find success, you have to hyper focus on one thing and you should not let yourself get distracted by the shiny object syndrome and you should hyper focus? What's your response to that?
Okay. So I have a chapter in my Aspire book that talks just about that. Most people are what I call a flea, and it's almost indicative of the newer generation, whatever Gen X is, between 25 and 35. I'm not indicting you people if you're Gen X, but between 25 and 35, attention spans are really short. Mind you, I believe in mono-maniacal focus. Mono-maniacal focus. So tomorrow when I'm out there on that 17-mile tire drag, I'll be thinking about the new book I'm reading, but I'm there putting one foot in front of the other for whatever 4 or 5 hours that it takes me. I'm not distracted by the shiny object. So I'm an executioner. Either you're a flea, meaning, think of this in terms of the hands on a clock. At 15 after, a flea jumps off and gets onto the next thing. Real estate, for example. Oh, I love being a house flipper. Then I want to be a renovator. Then I want to own commercial buildings or storage units or Airbnbs. You never become an expert at anything. You're a flea. If you get to half past, the large hand is at 30 minutes past, and you quit or you move on to something else, I call you a half-asser. Because at the halfway point, that's when things get really hard. They get really tough. So either you're a flea, you're a half-ass. You made it past a flea, you're a half-asser at 30. At 45, if you quit, you've become too associated with the process, not the purpose. I know a lot of people that it's almost like you see that, and this happened to me at Badwater one year. I was so enamored with the race and the training leading up to it that before the finish line, I saw the finish line 100 yards away. I sat down. I didn't want it to end. Like I could have had a better finish time, but I sat down. I'm like, man, this process, I don't want it to end. And had I sat there a little longer, I would have DNF.
Oh, geez.
So there are people who get so enamored with the process that they actually get so they're afraid of. There's very few people. About 10% of the people that start something are afraid of success, and they quit before they're done. I'm an executioner. I go all the way to 12 o'clock. Once I start something, I have monomaniacal focus. I am writing a new book right now. When it's time to write, I'm focused on writing. When it's time to train, I'm focused on training. When it's time to design a new house, I'm focused on that. When it's time to do, we've built 32 villages in Haiti over the last 22 years. That's kind of on autopilot. Like one of the benefits of getting older, Jake, you become super efficient with your time. Super efficient because of experience.
Which I was going to ask you about that. You've been building over time. What are some of those habits and maybe systems you've put in place to make it more streamlined?
One word, well, a few words, but the first one that comes to mind is systemize. So even though I'm a super creative person, I have learned, so for those of you listening, Jake, the right side of the brain is known for what?
Right side.
Creativity.
Yes.
Left brain, statistical, analytical, kind of the nerd side of the brain. Most people listening to this podcast will assume they're either right brain, oh, Frank, I'm a creative, or left brain, Frank, I love sitting in the accountant's chair and counting the beans. I was brought up to believe, because of my grandfather and father being in banking, that I was left brain dominant. When I landed in Florida, Jake, I was left brain dominant. It took me a decade to wake up the synapses on the right-hand side of my brain so that now, many, many years later, I can toggle between right brain and left brain in nanoseconds. It's something that can be learned. So I'll give you a simple example. I might want to be this real estate artist and design a $20 million house and put a water floor in it. And I mean, one room was separated from another by an aquarium that I worked with Disney on. Jeez. Now, that's wonderful, but I got to toggle between right brain, which is the creativity and designing what we've designed. You can go to our website and see some of the most beautiful houses in the world. And the left brain side that says, am I going to make money on this? Here's a simple current example. Elon Musk SpaceX rockets. Right brain says, I want to fire a rocket into space. and be able to land it back where it takes off on the same pad it took off on. I mean, that seemed impossible. Mm-hmm. The left brain says, can I carry payload and make money while I do it? That skill of toggling between right brain and left brain allows me to do both really within nanoseconds at the same time.
As you're dropping all these knowledge bombs, I just want to pick your brain. And
before we go off that subject, I wish somebody would have told me that earlier.
Which is actually my question. Did you have any mentors along the way, or how did you learn all this?
No, because I didn't want to believe that I was some nerdy banker, because I'm real good with numbers. Not algebra numbers, but like math numbers and profit margins, how much to put into a house, where to spend the money, what rooms to spend the money in, what rooms not to spend the money in. You know, I'm really good at that. And because our margins, it's in my real estate books, were acquisition basis plus improvement basis shouldn't equal more than 65% of retail. So if you do the math on that, we were attempting to operate under 35% margins. Those are huge in the real estate business.
Crazy.
I didn't want to be just left brain. I knew that there was a creative side of me that had been silenced by my teachers and maybe people in my family who said, you're a banker. So why is that? Why does that have to be? No, I want to see in color. I mean, there's a reason in the biggest Crayola box, there's 264 different colors. God gave us that for a reason. He didn't give us a Crayola box of black and white. I want to draw with all those Crayola colors in that Crayola box. So if you're listening, believe me, you can awaken the side of the brain that has laid dormant because you've been told that you have a dominant side. It's not true.
I can only imagine the role that curiosity plays in this for you as well.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you're unwilling to accept a construct, which even the theory of right brain, left brain is a construct, how would you really know? I mean, yes, you get inside the brain through brain surgery and figure out right brain is creative, left brain is, I mean, how do they really know that? I have a hard time believing that. So yes, there's a lot of challenging constructs that said, you know, maybe as simple as an uneducated, corn-fed country boy from Indiana can come down and create a whole marketplace on the oceanfront with some of these houses without the education or being a designer, an architect, or a builder. That's the unlimited nature of human potential. And I don't want to jump there too early, but when we get to Badwater, I am not a gifted ultramarathon athlete at all. I struggle for every footfall. But if other human beings had run the toughest foot race in the world, according to National Geographic, why not me?
Absolutely. You know, and that's a great segue. So would you kind of paint a little bit of color of how you first came across Badwater and what that experience was like? And then we'll get into how many times you've done it and why it's so meaningful to you.
Everybody listening to this podcast feels most alive when they experience extremes for the first time. My definition of extreme is different from Jake's. Jake's is different from yours, the listener. So an extreme might be your first roller coaster ride or your first date, your first kiss, your first job, whatever it is. So I feel most alive, just like you, experienced extremes for the first time. I wanted to experience the hottest place on earth 21 years ago. And I looked it up and I found it was Death Valley, California. We had a house in Colorado that was maybe 3-hour drive from there, whatever the hour drive was. And so I booked a vacation in a half-star hotel, because in the Death Valley National Park, there's only like 3 hotels. And well, one of them is really nice now, but back then you shared rooms with scorpions. And if The Hills Had Eyes was being filmed, it was being filmed in your hotel. So I booked this stay in the desert with my daughter, with my wife, and my mother was with me at the time. We drive from Vegas with the windows rolled up to Death Valley. So I'm not being acclimated to the temperature outside. I mean, I think this was even before we had LED readouts in the rental cars of temperature. But no, I had my own, I had an 87 or 97 Silverado back then that I drove. So of course there's no LED. We get to the hotel, open the door, and it's like somebody putting a blow dryer in my face. Or you first open the dryer with your clothes in it and stick your face in it. I was instantly intoxicated by the heat that was overwhelming my senses. So being an athlete, you know, as a tennis pro, I was a fast twitch muscle guy. I could run a 10K in under 40 minutes. And I put on my shoes, I got out on the road. Now, mind you, I'm in Florida most of the time. No hills. I'm running down Highway 190, which most of the race takes place on Highway 190 in Death Valley. And I'm going downhill, Jake, with a tailwind. So I didn't sense the downhill. I didn't sense the tailwind because it was kind of insignificant, maybe 5-degree downhill. I get to the bottom of my 10K. I'd marked it off in my car before.
Just out for a fun run in Death Valley.
Yeah, just for fun. I turn around. Mind you, I took a bottle of water, one of those little 12-ounce plastic bottles of water. And by the time I got to like the second or third mile, the water was gone. When I turned around, that blast furnace heat wind hit me in the face. I'm running on blacktop pavement that I learned later was over 200 degrees. Jeez. And I'm running uphill. So at mile 4, I'm walking. Now, a runner, especially a sprinter like me, you're either a runner or you're an old man walker. Well, listen, I'm in my 40s then, so I'm a runner. I was embarrassed, ashamed. I'm walking now mile 4. By mile 5, I am weaving on the road, not able to keep my path straight because I was entering heat exhaustion. Death Valley National Park has the lowest golf course in the United States at like 220 feet below sea level. The sprinklers had run the night before. And oftentimes when a sprinkler system's turned off, especially an industrial strength one, they're still just spitting out a little bit of water. Mm-hmm. I crawled over on the golf course grass, stuck my mouth underneath that sprinkler that was still pissing out a little bit of water, drank scalding hot water just so I could get back to my hotel room. Got to the hotel room, wife opens the door, and the look on her face of shock when she saw what I looked like scared the shit out of me because I thought, what's wrong with me? Am I purple? Do I have an alien head on? Like, why are you looking at me like that? Well, my eyes had rolled back in my head. My lips were white, and I was ready to go into heat stroke.
Oh, my God.
Throws me on the bed. Cold towels on my body. Cold towels meaning dunked in cold water. Water over my head. As I begin to recover, she says, you need to go get a Gatorade and some bananas. So I staggered down to the general store at Furnace Creek Inn, and I go put my Gatorade on the counter, my banana, and the guy behind the counter. So picture a 49er prospector back from the 1840s, 1850s. He had that kind of hat on, scruffy gray beard, spectacles that were round on his face.
And here comes a half-dead rock star coming in the door.
But nothing fazed him. I plunk it down on the table, and he starts yelling at me. He says, he called me boy, you better get back out there. You're in last place. Okay, so heat stroke, heat exhaustion, hallucination. I'm barely making it. I have no idea what he's talking about.
Just feel like you're in a dream at this point.
Dream state was what I was in. I mean, I was nearly catatonic at that point. So I said, sir, banana, Gatorade, please just charge it to my room. I'm telling you, boy, the last runner passed here an hour ago. If you don't get back out there, you're going to miss the cutoff. One more time, sir. One more time, sir. Why are you yelling at me? And what are you yelling at me about? Get back out there. You mean you're not in the Badwater 135-mile ultra marathon? I'm telling you, you're never going to make it. He mistook me for, I had booked that vacation, unbeknownst to me, during the race. Jake, I had never heard the word ultramarathon uttered in my life. Never knew such a thing existed.
No idea what Badwater is.
Well, I don't know what an ultramarathon is.
Yeah, crazy.
So he then proceeds to tell me about this race that goes on every July. 100 runners from around the world run 135 miles from the lowest point in the Western Hemisphere at Badwater Basin all the way to the
Whitney Portal.
Trailhead at Whitney Portals at about 9,000 feet up, a little under 9,000. And I said, you got to tell me more. He goes, I don't got time. Just go to the ranger station. They've got a documentary they sell down there called Running on the Sun. Those of you listening, it's now free on YouTube. Might have some German subtitles on it or something. But I bought that DVD, went home when I got home to Florida, like a child who watched Bugs Bunny or the Road Runner, like hours on end, just sat in front of that TV. I watched that DVD back to front to back 20 times in a row.
So what was it about it that drew you in so much?
Well, first of all, the people that were showcased in that documentary, other than maybe one of the people who actually became my coach, it didn't look like they could run a 5K. A lot of the athletes out there, we all don't look like Kenyans. And that's not a knock on Kenya. Sure. We just don't look like people that can run a 2-hour and 20-minute marathon.
Yeah.
And that fascinated me. And I know how I felt after 6 miles. I almost died.
It's and yet there's people unfathomable that they're out there doing this.
But they are human beings with flesh and bones and blood running through their veins, just like me. And honestly, I probably looked more fit at the time because of my tennis experience and all that. And here they are. Now, back then you had 60 hours to finish, but still they are out there finishing what I learned later. Maybe I think 6 years later, National Geographic did a study on the toughest foot races in the world, and they deemed that the toughest foot race in the world.
Yeah.
And so I thought to myself, I don't even know if the word thought is the right word. I became mono-maniacally focused on preparing my mind to ultimately prepare my body to become an ultra runner. I hired a coach, the woman that was in that documentary, a woman who has finished Badwater 10 times. I think there's only one woman who's finished Badwater more than her. She's still coaching. And I will tell you what this woman did for me. Mind you, this was in July, so I'm watching the DVD until August. I think maybe I want to do this. I find her in September. I hire her in mid-September. There was only one more race on the calendar. Back then, there weren't a bunch of 100-milers, Jake. There just wasn't. There was one more race on the calendar that would qualify me to at least apply for Badwater.
Because Badwater isn't just something you sign up for and you go and do. There's a very limited opportunity to participate in this thing.
Yeah, well, nowadays you have to have 3 100-mile races on your resume. Those have to have been very recent. It's really hard to get in
and
now.
You have
Back
to have
then,
a strong resume on top of that. I guess to your point, you have to be a good writer, really. You have to tell a good story.
Well, but back then you needed one 100-mile race. My running resume was non-existent, except for my coach, Lisa Smith-Batchen, got me ready to run a 100-mile qualifier in 6 weeks.
Damn.
I had never run further than a half marathon in my life. Yet 6 weeks later, I finished 100 miles in less than 24 hours.
So you're calling on every bit of fitness that you had from childhood on that.
No.
Really?
It wasn't
Nothing.
that. She got my mind to believe. She was a master. Because I will tell you, from this point here, I don't know when your podcast will come out, but we're recording it toward the end of April. My body is maybe 10% more I got to go. To get there, my mind, I still have a ways to go. I still got 30 to 40% of dialing in my mind, because once my mind was right, like it was in the 6 weeks leading up to running a 100-mile race and finishing under 24 hours, that's the key. Like my mind, I have run Badwater 12 times. I've failed 5 of those times. I've finished 7. I've failed 5. There's only one person that has more DNFs than I do out of all the runners that have ever attempted Badwater. And I will say, of the 5 DNFs, 3 of them were due to the failure of my mind. My mind let me down. My mind failed me. The other 2 were physical symptoms that were dangerous, and I couldn't
overcome it. And as we've talked about in the last conversation, we're not small people either. I mean, you're 6'1", I'm 6'4", so it's not like you have this super efficient little runner body to where you can just get out there and go after it. You're really having to take into account all these different things.
Yeah, and I have learned why some of the people that are maybe not as tall as you and me, but maybe even can weigh a little bit more. Like, I'll be 180, maybe 185 or something at the start line. People run that race all the time, even some women over 200, because the body needs fat when you're going through something like that. I mean, we can get into all the calories and the magnesium, the potassium, sodium stuff, but
no, it's a great point, though. Yeah, sorry.
Just before we get off the mindset. So I was a one step away from the couch potato kind of before that. Yes, I could run 10K fast. And yes, I was a tennis pro. I wasn't anymore. Yes, I was fit to run 6 miles, but I never ran any further than that. And so to convert my mind first and then my body to follow, the mind wills what the body does not want to do. The mind can will the body to do what it does not want to do. And when the mind got right, and I converted the mind first into an ultramarathoner, then the body had no alternative but to follow me, except on 2 occasions.
Let me ask you a question on that, because as somebody who is very strong-minded already, what perspective did she give you to take you to the next level? Were there 1 or 2 key things that she really had you focus on? Because you are mentally very strong already.
Okay, so there's a difference between having a strong mind, and then there are things in life that I can present to you. I can present to you, Jake. I can present to you, the listener, that I call 3 I's: insurmountable, incomprehensible, and impossible. The 3 I's, they lay themselves on your heart, and 99 times out of 100, you walk the other way because they're incomprehensible, impossible, insurmountable. The whole concept still was brand new to me. Running 135 miles in 125-degree heat, nonstop on pavement that's 200-degree heat with over 20,000 feet of elevation change. So I don't care how strong my mind is. This is still incomprehensible.
Yeah.
It's impossible. I believe I can do a lot of things. It was almost on the same league as boxing. Like, I don't ever want to be punched in the face. So in high school, I was a decathlete. You put the ball in my hand, I could play it. The sport, whatever, I could play it. But running that far, I was a gifted athlete. A traditional baseball, basketball, football, tennis type athlete. And that came from my father being an Olympian. But ultra running, I will tell you, from the very first footfall I took back in September of '04 to the one I'll take tomorrow on that 17-mile tire pull, I struggle. None of it comes easy to me. It was her that made me believe that, yes, Frank, you might be good at tennis, but she taught me, even the winners of that race, you don't run 135 miles. You're not running the whole time. And even my first race was 20 years ago. I'm walking a solid 14-minute mile. That's fast. Now, if I walked the whole race at that pace, I'd finish in about 36 hours walking. And my running pace back then was, hell yeah, I could run a 6 or 7 minute mile. Now my running pace is probably like an 11-minute mile because I had my knees replaced. So I'm not losing that much time by walking. Nobody walks the 17-mile climb from mile 42 to mile 59. Nobody walks from mile 72 to mile about 82. I'm sorry, nobody runs. My bad. Nobody runs these sections because they're so steep. So she taught me how to power hike when I didn't know how to do that before, and how to be efficient. Like, people think, oh, how can I ever run that far? You know what I do in my walk breaks? I eat, I drink, I meditate. I can go number one. Literally, I can just turn to the side and do a side step, be moving
you're still
forward.
moving. Yep.
Yeah, I can do all that stuff. There's a mantra, I don't know if I came up with it or somebody else did, but relentless forward motion.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Relentless forward motion. I mean, that's just something that I apply to everything in life. And the times that I have DNF'd or come close to DNFing, I remember my wife, one year I was really close to pulling out, mile like 92. I just got done puking for like 20 minutes and had nothing left, no energy left. Like a battery had its energy just sucked out by the heat. She said, okay, the van is behind you and we can get in the van and the hotel is behind us. So you got to walk back to the van. The finish line is in front of you. You can just walk that way. Just one way or another, you got to walk a particular direction. You either walk back toward the van and then you go back to the hotel and you pull out of the race, or you just start walking toward the finish line. Relentless forward motion. There have been times in the race, Jake, that I know I was clocking 8-minute miles. So that would be a sprint. Yeah. There have been times that I know I was running. I was jogging. Right now, I kind of what we call, it's the Badwater shuffle. It's a super efficient way to run. Your feet barely leave the ground. It is a stride designed for ultra runners. I do that often. I walk, I power hike, I power walk. I have crawled across the finish line. I have crab crawled from mile 131 to mile 133. And for those of you know, if your stomach facing the sky and your hands are behind you, and I do that one year to keep the blood from rushing down into my head. I had to keep my head above my heart, because if you crawl normally, you're crawling with your head down. Yeah. I had to crawl the other way because I had
things
passed
you have
out
to
at 131. But it gets us back to relentless forward motion.
So as you're saying that, I do remember there's a book written. It was actually, I think, Brian Powell, one of the original founders of I Run Far. He wrote a book called Relentless Forward Progress. And I know that because I remember finishing it the night before an ultra, and it was a great, great book. So if anybody hasn't read that, Relentless Forward Progress by Brian Powell. But you touched on something. You were mentioning your wife and the van. So how important is having a good crew out there to support this effort?
So it's the 18th of April? Okay. So if you look at my social media posts, just go to Instagram or Facebook, look me up, you'll find me. My post of, I think, April 16th or 17th was all about the importance of crew. And again, I have, 400,000 followers on Instagram. Yes, I'm part of the cult that is Badwater, but I got life outside of ultra running. And I have to explain to people who don't really understand, there's no aid stations at Badwater. Yeah. 0 aid stations. So my crew leapfrogs me every mile to 2. I will go through 12 gallons of fluid in 48 hours. I know people who think they're all that when they drink a gallon of water a day. I mean, try drinking 6, because you have to survive 6 gallons of water. I have to put in 300 calories every hour. I got to put in 7 to 8 grams of protein through amino acids every hour. I can't do that from an aid station. Yeah. Let me make this very clear. There is no mile 5, let alone mile 135, without an all-star crew.
Yeah, for those that haven't done one of those types of races where it's self-supported and you have that crew leapfrog, I've done that myself. It's a completely different experience. But to your point, there is no success without it.
It's a military operation without the battle. It's everybody has a role. It's a bonding experience. Every time I do a Badwater, this will be my 13th, I have at least one new crew member, because I want to see the race through a new set of eyes. It's very important to me to have a new set of eyes, because I know every rock, I know every cactus, I know every turn, I know every scratch in the road on that course. And when I start to feel like shit, mile, let's say 40, And to think I've got 95 miles to go, oh my God, I could psych myself out right away. But yet here's this crew member who's seeing it for the first time through these wide eyes. Yes. I will then get inside their eyes and it brings me back to life. It's just like my complacency leaves me.
That's such an interesting tactic.
Yeah. Well, I know what wonderment feels like out there. It's not like I've lost the wonderment of Badwater. Every race is different. But believe me, and you're a distance runner, you know how it feels when you're in the pain cave.
Yeah.
And the mind, all it's trying to do is just protect the body. You can't blame it.
Right.
You're falling apart. You've got blisters. You're dry heaving. You're cramping, what have you. The mind's trying to protect the body like it's supposed to.
Yeah.
And to dial back further, when you were 8 years old, if you were sick, mommy put you in bed. You didn't feel good. You laid down. Well, you're going to feel sick in a distance race. There is no coddling. You got to keep moving.
And that comes back to strength of the mind.
Yep.
So let me ask you about how you're bringing in somebody new and they're looking at it through these wide eyes of wonderment, which kind of ties back into the people of Badwater, the community of Badwater. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Before we leave the crew, I have crew members going back 20 years, and the bonding experience it takes in that Death Valley desert, without pounding on the pulpit or shoving the Bible down your throat. I'm a Christian. I know the Bible really well, and I also now understand why the most poignant parts of the Bible, Exodus, for example, Jesus' 40 days in the desert, most poignant passages in the Bible take place in and or about the desert. Because there's a rawness, there's a spiritual awakening that happens in that Death Valley National Park along that Highway 190, unlike anything else I've ever experienced. So that's kind of why I go back. And what does that do when you're around? In this case, I'll have 3 people on my crew. The bonding, it's like we're brothers for life or sisters for life. That's the first part. So the crew and me, especially, I'd never felt closer to my wife when she's my crew chief, even than on the day we were married. I feel closer to her out there than I did on the day I said I do on the altar.
Interesting.
Yeah, so that's the crew. That's how important that crew is. Then comes the community, the cult that is... So the ultra running until like 10 years ago was kind of cultish. It's not cultish anymore.
Right.
I think you and I, it's changed. There's a lot of runners. I told you on our introductory call, in 10 years or less, there will be a 100-mile race in the Olympics. It'll be that broad.
I agree.
But there is a special, I guess you've been to the start line at any ultra. That's the place, at least I said 30 minutes ago, that I never have to explain myself.
Yeah.
We are all living on the island of misfit toys. We're all misfit toys. You remember that cartoon when you were a kid? It was a Christmas cartoon. It was called The Land of Misfit Toys. And all these toys were broken.
Yep.
And they were sent to their own island. Well, all of us in that race are broken or unique in some way, shape, or form. And that's a community that I cannot wait to get back and see, because it's been 6 years since I've seen that start line.
Which actually, let's touch on some of those reasons why. You were diagnosed with leukemia? And you've gone through leukemia treatment now, and not just that, but you're also going through double knee replacement, both knees at the same time last year?
Right. Yeah, 2004, early 2004.
So how does all this tie into your approach to doing Badwater again?
Well, I will tell you, it's been the carrot for me, Jake. I mean, there's been some really, really dark, deep, never-ending, circuitous rabbit holes that I've been down during the last 5 years, starting with the day that the country was shut down with COVID. March 11th, 2020 was the day I was diagnosed with chronic myeloid leukemia.
Oh, Jesus.
And on top of that, one of my best friends, one of my crew members in 2 of my races had just died from leukemia 2 weeks before.
Oh, my God.
I got my own diagnosis.
While you're still dealing with this.
Well, I'm dealing with his death. I watched him die, and I watched the way he died, and nothing was off on me. Nothing was off. By the grace of God, I went in for routine blood work, and my white blood cell count, which is usually on an ultra runner, is usually going to be high. So typically, if you're not an ultra runner, it's going to be between, I don't know, like 4,000 and 8,000. If you're a distance runner, it's going to be in the low teens, because your body's always in repair mode, and you need white blood cells to repair what's always being broken down. So my whites were always in the 12, 13,000. They were at 20, and then they jumped to 30, and then they jumped to 50. Long story short, they went to over 250, and that was the giveaway to my doctor that I needed to get to the hospital very quick, or I was going to die. And so on that day, I got the diagnosis, and I thought, oh my God, my life's going to go the way my friend Mike's did. It's going to be a slow, agonizing death. And I I won't spend a lot of time on this, but he died in a hospital room full of get well cards, surrounded by prayer warriors, balloons, and flowers. I wasn't going to go that way. And so this is a little bizarre, but I didn't tell anybody, including members of my family, until I had turned the corner and it looked like I was going to make it, which meant that was like 2 years later. I told my mom, of course, my wife, my daughter, my spiritual advisor, and my therapist. Those were the only 5 people in my circle that knew I had a death sentence. And I didn't want the prayer warriors, even though I know how the power of prayer. I didn't want the get well cards. I didn't want the sympathy.
It's not the attention you're looking for.
I was just going to disintegrate and go away, just go. I want attention for a lot of things. I just didn't want attention for that. Mm-hmm. And so, I turned the corner on that. Matter of fact, you're one of the few people I've even used the CML word with. In my book, Adversitology, Overcoming Adversity, when you're hanging on by a thread, I wrote that book after overcoming this. I call it blood disorder or intruder in my body. I don't even give it a name because I don't want to empower it. And so I don't say it. I forbid my doctor to put it on charts. When I walked into the office, he wasn't allowed to call it by name. Nobody in my family was allowed to call it by name because it's not that I wasn't accepting it. I was going to disidentify
you don't
from
want to have ownership over you. Yeah.
No power, none. And I wrote a whole book on how to overcome physical, financial, relational, or spiritual adversity when you're hanging on by a thread like I was. So look it up, Adversitology. So after that happened, feeling great. I'm getting better over a couple of years. And then my knees have about 40,000 miles on them. Between being the tennis pro, I did play tennis tournament. One year I played like 30 tennis tournaments. So I was very active with my knees.
Hard surface.
And then the training. Yeah, hard. Yeah, I was a singles player. I wasn't a doubles player. I didn't really play on clay. I played on hard. So that and the training, I went through, I won't bore your listeners with the number of methods that I tried in lieu of knee replacement.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I had the nerves burned at the end of my nerve endings on my knees so I wouldn't feel the pain. Physically burned off. The problem was nerves regenerate, so it only worked for like 4 months. I went to extremes. I had cadaver cartilage put into my knees in place of where my cartilage was gone.
You're trying everything.
I tried everything until my doctor said, you're done. The only thing you can do is knee replacement. I said, Doc, one thing. I know I live in South Florida with a bunch of geriatrics who all they want to do is walk to the end of the driveway and get their mail. I want to run past the finish line at Badwater. Yeah. What can you do for me? So he's had over 20,000 patients. He's had 11 that have had both knees done at the same time, which he felt like I could do. I did. And I will be honest with you, everything else is falling apart, but my knees feel
Your knees are fantastic. Well, on that, like you said, your first Badwater was over 20 years ago, and now this one you're going for your 8th finish. How has your training changed to make sure that you're approaching this in a way that you're going to achieve the ultimate goal, which is crossing that line again for the 8th time?
So, when you can combine a pretty strong mind with an athletic-esque body, you've got a bit of an advantage. I mean, your chances are better than the average guys. And that's why, I finished 6 Badwaters in a row until I DNF'd 5 out of my next 6. Mm-hmm. That's how my career has gone at Badwater. So I realize now that the ultimate challenge for me, probably one of the most challenging things in my life, is my mind is going to get me to that finish line. My body has no business being out there. It really doesn't. I mean, my hips will probably be next to go. Even the knees that were replaced, there was a little bone left in there that chipped off 1 month before my qualifier for Badwater that I had removed. I still made the 100 miles, with surgery. So I have to train super smart. Super smart. What does that mean? It means I got to take 2 days off during the week when I'd rather not.
Yeah.
I'd rather put in the 150-mile weeks. I can't do that. I think the max miles I will put in now will be a 75-mile training run. I'll do a 50-mile training run. But average miles a week might be 50.
You're doing it more with intention and singular focus of getting you to this ultimate goal. And it sounds like ultra running on a wider scale really hasn't been your draw. It's specifically Badwater that keeps pulling you back.
Yeah, so imagine that you go through college and you're a decent basketball player and you're the last person drafted in the draft. And you actually ride the bench the whole year, all the way through to the NBA Finals. And you get to play in Game 7, and you hit the winning shots, and you get to take the Larry O'Brien trophy home with the rest of your teammates. That's what happened to me at Badwater. That was my first, really, other than the qualifier in 2004, that was my first ultra. So I'm not really, like I told you, I don't love the sport. I like it a lot, but I don't love it. I love Badwater, and I have found no interest to run other legacy 100-mile races because you run Badwater as your first race, basically. There isn't anything else that interests me.
Nothing compares. Yeah, it's just got your heart.
Yeah, it does. It does.
Well, Frank, I want to be respectful of your time, but obviously you're fascinating on so many different angles, and I love the knowledge and the wisdom and how you lay these things out and how thoughtful you are. It's given me so much consideration, so thank you for taking this time and sharing it with me. And just a couple last things to kind of tie this up, if we could. First off, for those that want to learn more about you, where can they find you?
So the easiest thing to do, besides Googling, my name will come up pretty close to the top, I think, is go to frank-mckinney.com. Not underscore, but frank-mckinney.com. PC Magazine has called that website Disney on a desktop because you can take tours of the houses we built on the ocean. All 9 of my prior books, you can read sample chapters. You can listen to sample audible chapters for free. You can see that we never even got into what our carrying house has done in Haiti.
I was just going to say that. We didn't even get into all your philanthropy, and we're going to have to at some point for sure.
We definitely,
I think that's a conversation in itself.
It needs to be, because people may go away thinking this guy's either egotistical, he's a superhero. If you're not religious, consider this a great life mantra. If you are religious, this comes from the Bible, the Gospel of Luke, chapter 12, verse 48. To whom much is entrusted, much is required. To whom much is given, much is expected. I've been given a lot, Jake, and we started building self-sustaining villages in Haiti 23 years ago. In those 23 years, we built 32 entirely self-sustaining villages, caring for and providing a self-sustaining existence for over 14,600 children that were eating dirt flavored with bouillon and lemon juice, and their families. So Badwater tie this year, I'm selectively suffering a little for those who suffer a lot involuntarily in Haiti. So if you go to our Caring House page on frank-mckinney.com, you'll see donate 10 cents a mile, $13.50. Donate $1 a mile, $135. And if you got the means, donate $10 a mile. It's $1,350. With 10 cents per mile, I can buy 5 meals in one of our orphanages for kids who are eating dirt flavored with bouillon and lemon juice. For $135, that's 50 meals. And if you can do the big one, it's 500 meals. So there is a reason beyond just trying to see another freaking finish line that I'm going to be out there putting myself through this, listen, there's 1,090 finishers of Badwater since its inception in 1987. Only 5% will have been my age or older. So it's not like I have the greatest chance of seeing that finish line. But knowing that every footstep I take, every mile that I log, I'm raising money to take dirt out of children's mouths. Literally, they're eating dirt that looks like a hamburger, but it just has a little flavoring in it. And providing then 2-part protein, 1-part carbohydrate, nutritious meals to those kids. That should be either an encore discussion, because you can have passion in your life. A lot of people on this maybe, I have a passion for ultra running. I can have passion for chocolate, but it's not good for me. What's your purpose?
Yeah.
And my purpose, really, when I learned about what we can do in Haiti, building an entire self-sustaining village for around $300,000, we're talking 50 houses, a community center, a school, church, clinic, renewable food, clean drinking water, and some form of free enterprise.
It's so much bigger than one person.
It's given me, who lives a very mercurial life, reason to live.
Yeah.
I mean, I tell you, that's what's kept me alive, is what we do over there.
I absolutely love that. And I do think that's something that warrants its own in-depth discussion for sure. Again, I appreciate everything that you've shared, Frank, your time, your wisdom and consideration and thoughtfulness. I truly do appreciate it. Thank you so much. And I'm going to close this out on the question I like to kind of wrap these things up with is, what does legacy mean to you, and what's the legacy that you want to be remembered for?
Oh, that's easy. I will tell you, I struggled with thinking my legacy was going to be the most expensive house we ever built on spec was $50 million. Oh, my legacy is going to be the real estate artist. And then I thought, maybe, hey, here's this guy there are 28 people that have finished Badwater more times than me. Maybe my legacy's Badwater. Maybe I'm working on my 10th book in my 9th genre. Who's done that? Maybe it's as an author. Jake, the generational impact that our Caring House project will be making long after I'm dead in Haiti, through providing the self-sustaining existence to a child who might not even be born yet, but who's born in one of our villages. That's the legacy that I now hope to be remembered for. The rest is, like they say in the Bible, it's fleeting in the wind. It's burned up and gone tomorrow. But that legacy we will leave in Haiti, I hope endures. I know will endure for generations.
I love that. Well, I hope that people take the opportunity to learn more about you and learn more about the Caring House Project and this effort that you're putting forth with Badwater coming up. Frank, thank you again so much for sharing your time, and wishing you nothing but success and an amazing experience at the upcoming Badwater.
Hey, Jake, thanks. And for those of you who do go on to frank-mckinney.com and you reach out, everybody who contacts me is responsible. I mean, I got people saying, send me $1 million. Well, I'm not going to respond to you. But if you send me a responsible request, like how do you get into ultra running or real estate, or I want to write my first book, or I love what you're doing in Haiti, I will respond to you. I'm glad to. Just start with frank-mckinney.com.
And I'll add that to our show notes as well.
Great.
All right. Well, Frank, thank you again. I hope you have a great rest of your day and a good weekend, and we'll talk again soon.
Thank you. See you later.
All right.
Bye, everybody.
And that wraps up another episode of the Run from the Norm podcast. Frank, thank you for the fire, the wisdom, and the unapologetic reminder that life gets a lot more interesting when you stop playing by someone else's rules, because that's where the good stuff happens. And to you, dear listener, thank you for showing up and listening to this episode. If this conversation lit a fire in you, go check out what Frank's doing over at frank-mckinney.com. And don't forget, we're sponsoring this episode ourselves, so use code FRANK, F-R-A-N-K, at runfromthenorm.com for free shipping anywhere in the U.S., and 10% of all our sales through the end of the month are going to go directly to the Caring House Project to help build homes for families in need. Support the mission, grab some gear, and build your own story. With that, I will say stay curious, keep moving forward, and if nothing else, get outside and run from the norm.
Check that mic, make sure it sound right, boy.